Hey, have you ever stopped to think about how we actually learn the really important stuff in life? You know, I'm not talking about algebra or the dates of historical events. I'm talking about the big stuff, the values that genuinely shape who we are as people. Well, that's the puzzle we're going to try and solve today. I mean, really think about it. How in the world do you teach something you can't even see? You can't just point to it. You can't draw it on a whiteboard. It's not some math problem you can just solve, right? And that makes teaching it, well, a huge challenge. Exactly. We're talking about things like responsibility or empathy or fairness. These aren't just vocabulary words. They're supposed to be the principles we actually live by. And yeah, we can talk about them and define them forever, but how do you get someone to really get it, to truly internalize these ideas, to feel them in their gut? And this is where it gets interesting, because the answer is kind of counterintuitive. It turns out the key isn't to talk more. It's not another lecture, it's not another set of rules to memorize. The answer is to do more. It's all about creating an experience and shifting our focus from just talking to actually doing. All right, so let's dive into our first section, teaching the unteachable. This really gets to the core of the problem, right? How do we build these deep, personal values when, let's be honest, our usual ways of teaching just aren't cut out for the job? Okay, so this chart really breaks it down perfectly. You've got two completely different ways of learning. On one side, you have traditional learning. That's the one we all know, right? It's about being told stuff, sitting back passively, it's teacher-focused. But on the other side, you have experiential learning, and this is a whole different ballgame. It's about doing. It's active. It puts the learner, you, right at the center. Instead of abstract rules, you get concrete experience. It's literally the difference between someone telling you about honesty and actually being in a situation where you have to be honest. Which brings us to section 2, learning by doing. So if doing is the magic ingredient, let's really dig into the powerful idea behind it all, what we call the experiential approach. Okay, so here's the official definition for you. Experiential learning is basically a strategy where you learn stuff, knowledge, skills, and especially values through direct hands-on experience. But, and this is super important, look at what comes next, reflection and application. See, it's not just about the fun activity. The real learning, the magic, happens when you think about what you did and then figure out how to use that lesson later. That's what turns a simple experience into something that actually sticks. So what does that actually look like? Well, for starters, it means learning is no longer a spectator sport. You're getting off the sidelines and getting your hands dirty. It follows this really clear path. You have an experience, then you reflect on it, you learn from it, and then you apply it. And it's that process, that cycle, that takes value from just being a concept in your head to becoming a real principle that you actually live out in your life. All right, section 3 is all about the 4-step learning cycle. So, how does this whole thing work? Let's pop the hood and look at the engine that really drives experiential learning. It's a simple but incredibly powerful 4-step process that can turn pretty much any experience into a lesson. This is what's known as the Kolb learning cycle, and you can think of it like a spiral staircase for learning. First, you have a concrete experience. You just do something. Then, reflective observation, you step back and think, what just happened there? Next is abstract conceptualization. That's a fancy way of saying you figure out the big lesson or idea from what you did. And finally, active experimentation. You take what you learned and try it out in a new situation. And the cool part is, every time you go around the cycle, the learning just gets deeper and stronger. Okay, moving on to section 4, a lesson in responsibility. Now that's all the theory, but let's make this super concrete. We're going to walk through a really simple example, step by step, to see exactly how this cycle works in the real world. So for step 1, the experience. Let's imagine a group recycling project at a school. Pretty straightforward, right? It's a hands-on activity. Everyone's got to work together to get it done. A shared goal. Now for step 2, and honestly, this might be the most important part, the reflection. You don't just finish the project, high five, and leave. A facilitator, and that could be a teacher or a parent, anyone really, steps in and asks some key questions. Things like, so what actually happened during the project, or how did that make you feel? And what were the biggest challenges? And these aren't just random questions. They're specifically designed to get you to connect what you did with how you felt. And that brings us to step 3, the lesson learned. It's through that conversation, that reflection, that you start connecting the dots. You connect the doing with the meaning. That feeling of, hey, I did my part and it felt good. That's responsibility. That moment when you all figured out a problem together,
That's cooperation. You start to put a name to the values you literally just lived through. And then, step 4, the new behavior. This is where you close the loop. The lesson doesn't just stay in the classroom. You take that new understanding of what responsibility feels like and you apply it somewhere else. Maybe you go home and start a recycling system for your family. Now the value isn't just an idea anymore, it's an active part of your life. All right, last section, beyond the classroom. Because look, it's pretty easy to see how this works for a school project, right? But this whole idea is so much bigger than that. It's really a blueprint for how we learn throughout our entire lives. And here's the thing. You absolutely do not need to be a professional teacher to do this. Anyone can be a facilitator. Seriously. If you're a parent, a manager at work, even just a friend. Your role is to help create these meaningful activities, ask those thoughtful questions to get people thinking, and then help them connect the whole experience back to their everyday lives. And once you start looking, you'll see these opportunities are literally everywhere. Volunteering in your community, that's a masterclass in empathy and service. Role-playing a difficult conversation with a coworker, that's building communication and courage. Heck, even just keeping a journal at the end of the day to reflect on what happened, that's a powerful form of experiential learning you can do all by yourself. And this quote just nails it. The experiential learning approach ensures that values are not just taught, but lived, reflected upon, and applied. I mean, that's the whole game right there. That shift from passive listening to active living, it changes everything. And that's ultimately why this is so powerful. The learning becomes truly meaningful because you are actually there. You are a part of it. It becomes memorable because it's connected to a real experience, a real emotion. And most importantly, it's transferable. You didn't just memorize a rule from a book. You understood a deep principle that you can now take with you and apply to all sorts of new situations. So I'm going to leave you with a question, a little challenge. What's one value you can go out and learn through experience this week? And don't just think about it. Go do it. Create a little experience, whether it's for you or for someone you care about, and see what it feels like to truly live the lesson.